So good evening. Can I start, Marco? Yes. Okay, so good evening and hello everybody. And welcome to this second appointment with Mediterranean. And as we said during our first webinar, the goal of this program is communicating our chapters to the rest of the world. And when I say our chapters, I mean the Mediterranean chapters. And we also like to facilitate the exchange of experience, knowledge, and points of view among ourselves. So the chapters of the Mediterranean area. Okay, so we decided to start just to recap the idea, where the idea comes from, under the strong sponsorship exactly of the Northern Italy chapter. We decided to start meeting the worldwide community of project management with a series of webinars that I think you can see on the screen. This is the second appointment. And it's hosted, each of our webinar is hosted by the PMI in order, by one of the chapter of the region, and this second appointment is hosted by the Northern Italy chapter. And the Northern, like in all our meetings, we wanted to dedicate some initial, just short time to let the chapter present itself to every one of you, so you can understand what is the reality of the chapter in this case. And then every time we present something that we think is interesting about our region. And today, our topic is about lifestyle, food, and the diet that our Professor Santini will talk about. So this is just to let you know who we are. So it's we are 5 chapters, 2 Italian, the Northern Italy chapter, the Southern Italy chapter, the Greece chapter, who contributed with the first webinar last month, and Lebanon chapter. Okay, so let me pass the stage to Fabio Rigamonti. Is the Vice President of the Northern Italy organization of the Northern Italy chapter, and is introducing the chapter and then start the presentation of our speaker. So welcome again and enjoy the event.
Thank you, Maura Cristina. Welcome everyone, and ciao. It's a pleasure for me to introduce to you our chapter, the PMI Northern Italy chapter. And as you can see from here, this is our landmark, the Duomo of Milan, which we are very proud of it. It's really a big landmark that was built throughout different centuries. But let me tell you a little bit more about us. Passion and professionalism. This is a kind of a motto we have internally in our chapter, because for us, project management is not just a profession, but it's also a deep passion. Our chapter was founded in 1996 by a group of pioneers. And I can barely imagine how was at that time in the 90s, talking about project management as a profession, as a discipline. I personally joined the PMI Northern Italy chapter in 2009, and I think we were about 700 members. Today, in 2024, I'm happy to share that we have 2,700 members, and still we are growing. This means that the idea that was originally shared by this group of pioneers has really bloomed, not only in the Northern Italy, but of course, all around the globe. And today, if so many people are members of our chapter, it's because we are providing value for them, we are supporting their careers, and of course, it's also a way to build a strong community in the Northern Italy area. with such a big chapter, we are providing many deliverables to our members. We have a podcast, which we call it Project Management on the Go. We have a blog, the Hub. Of course, we have many events and webinars. We are supporting the members throughout the professional developments. We are available on social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We have 2 newsletters. So all these kind of activities can only be delivered thanks to our more than 100 volunteers. One
The
award
slide
we
is
are
not a movie, Fabio, the slide is not, is always passion and professional.
don't you see the information I'm currently sharing,
Mm,
Christina?
I still see the slide with the Vitruvian one.
Exactly, is
Okay.
the slide where I am.
Okay.
And we won the chapter award. We were a winner of the chapter award in 2021, which for us was a very special year because we celebrated our 25th anniversary at that time. Unfortunately, as well, you can imagine it was the year after the COVID. So it was a virtual celebration for our anniversary, but we are already planning a very big event for our next 30th anniversary in less than 2 years' time. And of course, everyone is invited. As you can see in our logo, there is not the shape of Italy, or there is not the Duomo of Milan or any other landmark in our region. But the founder of the chapter decided to use the Vitruvian Man, which is a design of Leonardo da Vinci, realized in 1490, because it represents what all of us and our members as project manager are aspiring to have a true balance, to reach the harmony, but also to have the balance between art and science, which is basically our profession. We are also organized in 3 regional branches. We have recently streamlined our branches in order to optimize our operations. We have the Northwest, sorry, with 3 regions, 2 regions in the North Center and 3 regions on the North East. The branches are core in our activities because we want to guarantee our presence for all our members, and also establishes strategic alliances with local companies, with other professional associations, and of course, collaborating with Italian and other global chapters like this program was built for. But you might think, why the project, the PMI Northern Italy chapter, what is the relationship with the Mediterranean? So let me start thinking about Genova and Venice. Those are 2 of the maritime republics that were our gate, the gate of the northern Italy to the Mediterranean. And especially Venice in the 15th century was expanding to the maximum throughout the Mediterranean. As you can see from here, it connected our area, the northern Italy, with what currently we call Croatia and Greece and Cyprus and Turkey. So these exchanges guarantee that we could export our ideas, our food, our art, our technology, but also in return, having all this information and new ideas coming, new food arriving, new technology arriving to us through you. And I have to say that it's always amazing when traveling across the Mediterranean to see ruins of what was the Venice Republic. Because, for instance, I've been recently to Greece, and that was amazing seeing many cities with the with the Venetian walls, for instance. But the story and the relationship between our region and the Mediterranean, I think, started way early. For instance, in Bologna is the first Western university, because teaching began around the beginning of the last millennium. And being the first university in Europe, it attracted students and scholars from all over the Mediterranean. And especially, it was very useful to spread ideas and strengthen cultural ties especially with Southern Europe, with Spain, and with the Arab Islamic world, which I might say it's the current Northern Italy part. Now, this connection with the Mediterranean, I dare to say that it's given by Milan because it's the economical capital of Italy. We are a very cosmopolitan city full of opportunities. Sometimes I might have to say also with contrast. Many people are coming to Milan, many companies are coming to Milan, and so this is currently our bridge with the rest of the Mediterranean world. As I was talking about deliverables, I would like to share some information with you. Our podcast has several episodes in English. We also had Pierre Lemans as an interview for one of our episodes. We had some events like At Lunch with Nick, which sometimes are also in English, so you might want to attend it. Those are very short webinars that are from 1:30 to 2 Central Europe time. And also the last one, I would like to share with you some of our culture. So my favorite dish, which is risotto with saffron, we call it a Milanese style. So you can also try it at home and think of all the different aspects that connect our world. But now I don't want to take too much time, and I'm very happy to introduce to you our speaker, Professor Enrico Semprini. He's a professor in obstetrics and gynecology, immunology, and infectious diseases. And also, it's very important, he's a master wine and cheese taster. So I really think he's the best person to address the topic that we are going to deliver today. And today we are going to manage it like an interview. So I'm going to start with the first question to you, Professor Semprini, which is the following. What is in common among the people living in this area, from south, north, and from east to west, when we come to talk about food?
My desire today is to transmit the concept that the Mediterranean diet is not just food, but it's a way of living. We are quite fortunate to live in this area of the world where the climate is quite mild. We enjoy for free 4 different seasons. We have a winter, we have a spring, we have a summer, and we have an autumn. Different colors, different food, different temperature, different number of hours of sun. It's a joy that not many other countries, like the Mediterranean countries, can appreciate and enjoy. If you ask someone about Mediterranean diet, according to their degree of knowledge in the field, whether it comes from anthropology, whether it comes from medicine, whether it comes from being food experts, you will get a number of food which are included or even recommended, and it is impossible for you to catch the meaning of Mediterranean diet without looking at the context in which this food is eaten. I know, because it was a worry of the organizers, that other type of feeding are not going to be detailed today, but they should be mentioned in my view. We cannot ask an Eskimo to use olive oil, nor to a Japanese, and they still live. They live quite a healthy life, basically comparable in terms of life expectancy and life quality to what we enjoy. So people use food which is available. This sounds very simple, but it's sometimes neglected. So we have to go and look back 1 second to this great scientist, Ansel Keys, who moved to Crete, right in the center of the Mediterranean Sea. And in my view, I am not partly Greek, but I do live frequently in Greece. I speak contemporary Greek, and I had classical studies, so I spent about 8 years studying ancient Greek. And this man was not coming from a similar background. He was coming from his university in Minneapolis. It's my idea that during a conference, I don't want any background. But if I show you, but you can easily imagine, the quarters of the University of Minneapolis, you will see a place that for most of you living in the Mediterranean is dreadsome. Square buildings, one after the other, with intersecting alleys to go through, a big parking, because in the States you don't go anywhere without your own car. And this man found himself on the shore of the south coast of Crete with beautiful blue waters, a beautiful blue sky, the rocks, because Crete is quite green, but not that much. And I will mention that to you later to understand why there is so much interest on olive oil. And the reason is very simple. They didn't have cows. They didn't have cows to produce butter. And they don't fish whales. And they cannot extract oil from fish because it's too hard to catch it and then to squeeze it to get oil out. And so they were using their natural product, which is olive oil. I have to remember to you that still now Greece has 16 million sheep and catrichia and only 700,000 cows. And out of the 21 cheeses that they produce with a proper designation, only 2 are made of cow milk. All the rest are made with sheep and goats milk. Now try to retro-project yourself back in 1960. And these scientists find himself in a place which, apart from the food, people were enjoying a very healthy and enjoyable lifestyle. Possibly the eldest community that we have in the Mediterranean is on a small island, Greek, which is called Heraclea. Okay, you go for holiday in Heraclea, and you go to the, as it's called, furno, to the bread shop, and it's closed. And then you ask to the neighbor, what time do they open? And they say, we don't know. Why? Because the man that produces bread goes to work when he wants. And everyone accepted. Now, just imagine then someday you have to go to the office, whether you like it or not, or you go to the office only when you want. And you start your conference when you want and not when it's needed. Okay, it's a peculiar life that is intended for very small community, might not be that productive, but could be very enjoyable. On top of that, Greeks are sailors. Sailors like most of the people living on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. And they receive the benefit that all sailors receive is that you have to learn and adapt yourself to other cultures. If you need some help, if you want to establish a trade, if you want to marry a woman that you find particularly attractive in another port, and therefore they are open. And is also part of the Greek tradition and part of the Mediterranean tradition as well, because Greece influenced so much the whole life of the upper part of the Mediterranean that you always welcome a guest. You are obliged to provide a bath, food, wine, we see why, without asking a question. Then it's up to the foreigner to declare where it is coming from, what is doing there, but you have an obligation, a superior obligation to provide food and shelter to anyone that knocks at your door. In this context, this open hospitality with very few people in that area of Crete speaking English to a foreigner like Ansel Keys was a starter to look deeper into their habits and why they were looking so healthy and why they were enjoying life so much. And as a scientist, he pointed his attention to food. Now, if you look at the picture of Mediterranean diet, you will see that this is a cultural concept. It's a cultural concept, and everyone agrees on olive oil. Olive oil is the most exquisite vegetable oil that you can produce in your own garden. Don't try to do it with other seeds because they are unpalatable. You cannot enjoy them. You can cook them, transform them, use it as lipids for cooking, but don't try to eat it raw. Just the opposite of olive oil. Olive oil will give the best flavor when it's uncooked. And therefore, it was completely unused Ansel Keys to this culinary and gustative jewel as olive oil. And he realized also the variety of food, because still in Europe and on the Mediterranean shores, the consumption of vegetables is about 10-fold what is in the standard American diet, with a very important difference, that due to seasonal variability, we enjoy different food. It's very difficult to think about autumn without chestnuts, very difficult to think about spring without asparagus, very difficult to think about summer without peaches and without prunes and without figs. Ansel Keys lived there for quite a long time, and he was intrigued by the low rate of cardiovascular disease. Now, it was 1960, there were not many research tools, and people were therefore not registered, so to know the exact number of myocardial infarction on the island of Crete in 1960 was impossible. But still he has this hint, and I'm happy that they're now producing in front of you onions, peppers, and tomatoes, because we speak of Mediterranean diet, but the tomatoes were not available until Columbus discovered America. So what have the Mediterranean people been doing without tomatoes? And also you see yellow and red tomatoes as they were. And then we selected the red variety because it's the most appealing. And then you have beans, that type of beans that you see are called mavromatica because they have a black eye. Mati is eye in contemporary Greek. And then you have oil, and then you have onions and bell peppers, and they both come from the Middle East. So it tells you that the Mediterranean was an optimal cradle for absorbing other cultures. And
yeah, sorry for interface, Professor Semprini. There are a couple of questions related to the topic that you have just announced. So we'll read you a couple of questions that are coming
that's very good.
right in. One is olive oil common in all the different Mediterranean area or specific to one of the area and not used by others, as far as you know?
Okay, the olive tree characterizes the Mediterranean in its most elegant form. It's a very resistant tree to diseases. It can withstand dryness and drought very easily. The wood, thanks to the amount of polyphenols that is included, is quite resistant to bugs and parasites, and is present in large amount on all the shores of the Mediterranean. Now, you say, why on the shores? Because people were living close to the sea. It's very easy to do 15 miles on a sailing boat. It was very difficult and risky to do 15 miles on the road. On top, where rivers were included, like Cairo, as the Nile, for example, the city could be inland, connected to the sea through a river. And all major cities in the world, Rome, Washington, D.C., Paris, London, are on a river for that reason. So the question was about olive oil. Is it diffused? Yes, it's diffused. Is it the main cooking oil? Of course it is. Why? Because many Mediterranean countries are dry and they do not have grass to feed cattle. And therefore, they have no milk and they don't produce butter. Now, is this more or less healthy? I never use the privilege of being a doctor to dictate views that sometimes are based on very scant scientific evidence. Because it goes with the amount that you eat, whether it's hot or raw, whether it has been cooked for a long time, with which ingredients, in which amount, in which context. And therefore, to tell you that something is bad or good is not my aim. My desire when I give a conference is to provide the audience with a little tool, a little set of tools to understand the concept. So I'm not here with the dates. Of course, I know that Ansel Keys was born in 1904, died 2004, 100. So he had a very long life. He mostly...
Oh, sorry.
Hello? Yes, go ahead.
There is actually, there are many questions coming in, so that's why I'm interrupting you, because there is a question that I think you might have already answered. Is there something wrong in the Mediterranean diet, per your opinion? Is there something that the Mediterranean
there is nothing wrong. If you look at the Mediterranean diet, it reflects exactly the availability of food, which is a large predominance of carbohydrates to achieve 1 kilogram of either beans or wheat. You need about 500 liters of water. To have 1 kilogram of meat, you need 15,000 liters of water. A Mediterranean area is not a wet area, it's a dry area. Now you understand why there is a prevalence of food based on carbohydrate. And then what do you add to carbohydrate? Well, you need a little bit of protein. Now, in the Mediterranean diet, they put a lot of attention to fish. But as I told you, the idea started from Crete, and Greeks are not fishermen, they're sailors. They sail to trade. They're great. One of the largest commercial shipping industry is the one of the Greek ship owners, as we know. So for a country which is only 12 million, they have more ships than the United States to carry oil tankers, and it's nearly unbelievable. So fish was not that common. And of course, they had mostly goat and cheese. And if you go and look at the pictures of what is intended as, the food variety, as cheese is still a hot topic for nutritionists and whatever, is usually excluded, but is a wonderful way for milk in a warm country to become immortal, because milk left outside will spoil in less than a day. So cheese was also a base for that, but the idea is not to list a number of recognized foods which are part of the Mediterranean diet, because we have not to forget that religion influenced a lot our culture. And if you think about the Catholic religion, which is very familiar to Italians, what do you have? The oil, you have the wine, you have the bread. And sometimes this need for wine, for example, allowed wine to go to South America, because the Pope allowed the Spanish people to invade South America only against the guarantee that they would have spread the Catholic religion. And you cannot hold Mass, the Holy Mass, without wine. And it was not that easy to send a bottle of wine from Europe to the South America. So we have to respect other countries with different religion where alcohol is not permitted, but it's not always been like that. Also, Muslims could drink alcohol. Then they changed their choice, and they got the recommendation of not having that. And then you have the Muslims who don't eat pigs. And we know that there was a big confrontation, so you have no pigs, because pigs were not common at all in Crete. And still now in Greece, the amount of Atlantica, which is the al-salas, is sold. So Atlantica are the sausages that are so common up in the north of Italy, in Spain, not on the shores, but in inland, yes, they are, were not common because they didn't know how to process the meat and maintain it. They had wild boars, as you know from Ulysses, that was recognized by her nurse, Tata, because of the wound that he got while chasing a wild boar. And then they were using it, but they were not used to dry it. They were not used to cure it. They had salt, of course, but they didn't have the culture to do it because they didn't have the meat. Let me give you one more example of how this concept of changing and interweaving cultures, many people have spent a few days in Greece for holiday. I wish so, because it's a beautiful country with beautiful people.
Okay,
And
sorry, Professor Semprini, for interrupting you, but can we follow the track of our questions so you can well explain what we planned to say?
well, why don't you ask me the question? I will answer gladly.
Yes, Fabio, can you
I
move
see
on
that.
now with the questions that we have prepared for?
Yeah, so we're going following these questions, but then many more are coming in the chat. So one of the other question was, what are the places, and you partially answered, what are the places in the world still maintain a so clear identity on how to approach diet and food? And when you have answered this question, then I will also check some in the chat board.
Okay. As I was telling you, we are focusing on the Mediterranean diet because it's very common in our area. And we think it is associated with a low risk of cardiovascular disease, being the benchmark, the high frequency of cardiovascular disease in the States. Where food is completely different, as we were mentioning. A lot of saturated fats, a lot of ultra-processed food, not very many vegetables, about 1/10 of what we consume in Europe. A lot of red meat, and a lot of overweight people. All factors that are not so common and were not common at all at the time that Ansel Keys was doing the study in Crete.
Great. I will move to the next question. It's related to us. So we are project managers. So what suggestion can you provide us about diet and style of living to facilitate communication and respect for others?
Well, the first recommendation that I feel in my heart is worth giving to highly skilled and selected people as you are is curiosity. Curiosity is a key element to establish a relationship. So if you meet with someone from Turkey, if you meet with someone from Tunisia, if you meet with someone from Cairo or Marrakesh, well, it might enjoy pasta alla matriciana, but it could also be a little risky if there are any leftovers, because in a very warm climate, the egg might grow a lot of unpleasant bacteria. And therefore, you are interested in understanding how they preserve themselves. Now, you know that in other areas, it's very common, the use of spicy food. Why do they use spicy food? They use spicy food to increase the gastric output of acid to sterilize food. And then you know that in all southern countries of the Mediterranean, they use a lot of garlic. Why do they use garlic? Because it's a very strong antibacterial and anti-helminthic natural remedy. And then you use it if you go to Turkey, you see that they use pomegranate juice in many dishes. And you see that pomegranate is a very strong immunostimulating agent. So curiosity is at the basis to understand the pros a lot, and not the cons, but the limit of selected choice. And therefore, if I go to Cairo, I want to eat like an Egyptian. If I go to Tunisia, I want to eat like a Tunisian. Why? Out of respect? Yes, for sure, respect is the first thing. Out of curiosity? Yes, you must be curious. But this will establish a line of communication. You are both eating together. And being together is already the start of a relationship, a collaboration, a speech, an ability to communicate. It's very important. Food was possibly the basis of establishing large communities of people, because it's easier to provide food, to preserve it, to defend it, and it's very difficult, and all of you traveling as much as I do, wherever, you very rarely enjoy to eat by yourself. You need someone for defense and for sharing the pleasure. Now, if you buy a bottle of wine, which is very expensive, and you drink all of it, you will not be that happy. You rather share half of the bottle with a good friend and discuss about the wine, and this will give you much more pleasure than the whole bottle kept for yourself. So this curiosity to know what he thinks about the wine. Does he feel the same bouquet? Does he see the same colors? Does he have the same taste? That's the basis of a structure, because then, as you are a product manager, you might also think how you manage and change some of the characteristics of that drink to be ready for the market, to travel in warm countries, to accept other food which the wine has to pair with. So curiosity is the basis of everything.
And I agree with you. And actually, we have one person who is connecting from Pakistan, and she's curious about the Mediterranean diet. And she's asking if the Mediterranean diet is changing right now compared to some decades ago, and if so, how? So I'm taking also the questions we had, but also some questions from the audience, and I think that this one from Pakistan was pretty interesting.
I'm very happy that I simulated some questions rather than terrifying, the audience with a lot of data and whatever. Is the Mediterranean diet changing? No. Why? Because it's so simple. Most of you, I think, have heard about the alimentary or dietary pyramid with, at the basis, you have carbohydrates, then you have the protein, then you have the lipids, and then you have the adding pouch. And this pyramid has been maintained. Why? Because, as I told you, it's very easy to produce carbohydrate, more difficult to get proteins, and lipids that can be easily used are difficult to get from animals because they're expensive to keep and they can also be dangerous. I would not ask you to go and provide for me 1 kilogram of lion's fat. And therefore, you have other type of oils that use palm oil and whatever, but they have to be refined and treated. Otherwise, they're not palatable. So diet is remaining the same because it's so basic, so simple, and it goes through the world because the characteristics that I told you, the amount of water that you need, the amount of work that you need to grow a kilogram of flour, a kilogram of meat, a liter of a kilogram of oil, because oil is not measured in liters. Yes, commercially, yes, but it was given by kilogram. Why? To avoid counterfection by adding water. Then it will separate, and then it will sell it. Water has a very limited cost, oil, no. And still, if you go to Greece, that you now have understood how much is in my heart, but you order a Rethina wine, which is their most traditional wine, by kilogram and not by liters, for the same reason. Now, I hope I answered the question of these Pakistani, I understand a girl or a lady or whatever, and I'm ready for other questions.
Yeah, I will also pick another question from the list that are coming in, and then we will continue with ours. So a person also asked, do you see a connection between the evolution of other parts of culture, for example, art and architecture, and the culture of food? Do you see any relationship within culture in general and culture of food?
Yes, yes, yes. Why? The yes is motivated by the fact that other type of diet, as I mentioned to you before, and was also kind of a scare for you organizers, that we were mentioning other alternative to Mediterranean diet. Well, as I was telling you, an Eskimo cannot get olive oil. He feeds himself on whale fat. And still he doesn't have a higher incidence of heart attack. And if you go to Japan, they also have very long people, with a very long life expectancy and life quality. And still they think, okay, they also eat a lot of fish. And they don't have that much salt. So they have a low incidence of hypertension. But then you have the crossing of alimentary habits and the genetic of a population, which is very much influenced by food, but not entirely. Therefore, you ask me, are there alternatives to a Mediterranean diet? No, because it's so simple, so tasty, so pleasant, so inexpensive, so rich of tradition and flavor that it's very difficult to find an alternative. If you go around the world, most new restaurants have Italian food. Why? And we are not, cannot say we are the epitome, we are part of this Mediterranean community, but we have interpreted the Mediterranean diet in a very tasty way.
Thank you. I will continue with the slides, and then I will get another 2 questions from the audience because they're coming by. Oh no, that was the last one. So, okay, so we'll get the questions from the audience. The webinar is called Project Around the Table. Do you see a connection between project management and cooking?
Well, it's my idea, and I'm very much convinced about what I'm saying, that the method is transversal. So personality plays a role, and therefore experience remains personal. But then you have to establish a method. If you sit in a conference, if you have to address a production problem, you use exactly the same criteria that I use to evaluate a patient, to take surgical decision, to select the food, to cook. It's always the same. There is not 1 inch or a bit of difference. What do you do? First, you see what are your ingredients that you are available. Big market, more market. Big product, more products. Is it going up? Is it going down? Do you have to cook it because then it's going to be too long, you have to throw it away? So you have to sell it before it goes out of the market. Many reasons, but you always reason in the same way. So I think that we should learn from this simplicity of the Mediterranean diet a lesson. that you use what you have in the best possible way, and that also you work to establish a culture and a tradition. In my view, tradition is the ability to select what should be maintained through time and to discard what is not needed anymore. That makes tradition and culture.
Thank you. Another question that is coming by is, what is the difference between following a diet and living a healthy life?
Okay, that's a very well posed question. Okay, now if you eat a strictly Mediterranean diet and you never walk, you never exercise. Okay, that was impossible at the time that Ansel Keys did the study. There were no lifts, there were no cars. There were, a couple of motorbikes to go around. And you had to work the garden. You had to, carry the food. You had to walk up the staircase, not taking the lift. This was normal. Now, we have the opposite problem, that we use a lot of mechanisms to avoid physical fatigue or effort. We sit in the car, we press a button, and the door opens. Then we have to park the car in the garage, and the garage door opens again. And then in the future, maybe that also the car will put us down back in the lobby or in the living room of the house. And then you have to go to the gym to do the exercise that you avoided to do throughout your daily life. So you cannot exclude one of the two. To maintain yourself fit, there is a lot of recommendation on any newspaper and whatever that you have to do exercise. Then they say 10,000 steps per day, which takes an enormous amount of time. So no one will ever do it. But then you can at least avoid the lift and go up to the fourth floor and go down in any case. Why? It's a very good exercise. Coordination, you burn calories. But I don't want to talk, the first time that I use the term calories today, because there is an obsession that will focus on the chemical constituents of food. And here we are talking about the pleasure of food and the instrument that food provides to establish relationship and sharing of common knowledge.
Professor Semprini and Fabio, we are very close to the end of this meeting, this webinar with our attendees. And can I just, Fabio, if you agree, can I ask Professor Semprini if, can we recap in just a couple of the 3 points, the most important point, takeaway points that you want to offer to our guests?
Yeah, we mentioned it at the beginning, and it's very nice to recap at the end. Diet is not what you eat. Not even the term is correct. Diet is a way of living. So if you eat the very correct food and you don't move, as last question from one of the participants, the effect on your health will be scanty. And if you do exercise and you eat the right food, but you're not happy with your life, for a number of reasons, will not live very long. Optimistic people live longer than pessimistic people. It is very well documented. Therefore, the concept of diet is a concept not on focusing exactly on a few ingredients to put on your table, on the amount of drink that you should have in a day, or the amount of steps that you have to do, but to establish a lifestyle that reheartens your spirit and increases the joy of life. In Crete, Ansel Keys was so happy that when he closed his life by living in Pioppi in Italy, in the south of Italy, because he couldn't renounce to the view of the sea, to the spirit of the people, to the simplicity of their living, and also to the very good food that he included in the Mediterranean diet.
Thank you, Professor
Thank
Semprini.
you.
As Maria Cristina said, we are running out of time. We still have questions, so maybe we will provide you those questions and we will send the answer to these three remaining people who will raise very interesting questions, and maybe we can provide them an answer in the next days. Here we have a survey for the webinar satisfaction, and I will get back the
And-
podium to you,
okay.
Maria Cristina.
No, just Fabio, can you go back to the second slide? I think it's the second
Sure.
one, or the, just to remind you that our next appointment is with the Tunisia chapter with our friend Iman, and that I think she's also attending the webinar. And please, it's January the 16th, and it will be about experience of Tunisia chapter with schools, with teaching, and okay. And so I don't know if Fabio, do you want to let them, the sondaggio is now, later?
I think it was shared. I asked Matteo if the
Okay. So
survey
it's
was already shared.
So
I think so, yeah.
thank you all. Also, Giuseppe Meloni was participating to this webinar, so I also thank her and the PMI Dorner Ricciardi for having prepared this moment for us. And I just wish you a happy Christmas, because until 16th of January we will not meet again. And we hope to see you next year, 2025, and you will receive, of course, the usual communications that we send for this kind of webinars. And thank you very much and for joining. And thank you, Fabio. Thank you, Professor Semprini, for participating.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Cheers. Ciao, ciao.